interested in history quite a bit and in understanding why am I interested in history? I'm mostly interested in history because very interested in how ideas come to be the way they are now. So for example, I've just been studying, I think I mentioned thermodynamics, which is a field that's about the second law of thermodynamics. It's about 150 years old, okay? And I really didn't know in detail its history before the last few weeks. Its history is an incredible mess. Its history, I mean, there's some very great people who figured it out in the 1860s, and they kind of nailed it down by the 1870s or so. And turns out a bunch of things came to be believed within a few decades after that are simply not true. But if you trace through what happened historically, I now sort of understand how those things came to be believed. And it's interesting. And you kind of see that as first of all, one of the things is I sort of realized these things aren't true. And it's like, how can I be saying these things aren't true? People have believed this since 1870 or something. And it's like, I better go figure out why people ever came to believe this, because otherwise I don't know whether I know what I'm talking about. And if you trace it through, you realize people were having hypotheses about how things worked in gases and so on. But they didn't know gases were made of molecules. They didn't know molecules existed. And so they had a bunch of theory. And actually what happened is the theory that was done on the basis of sort of idealized fictional molecules worked pretty well. When molecules as a real thing were discovered, people said, so the whole theory must be right. So we proved the whole thing. But in fact, there was a different issue that happened there. But anyway, I think this thing about sort of everything has a way that it was discovered, and sometimes it's pretty interesting to learn how it was discovered. Another thing that happens is there'll be some field, there'll be some idea, and students will try and learn it, and they'll find it confusing. And teacher will say, no, this is this way. Look, it's in the textbook. This is how it works. Student will be confused. Turns out, if you look at the history, people were deeply confused sometimes for a long time, and it really is confusing. And what ended up in the textbook is some glossed version of what was really there. And if you understand that it was confused and sort of how people got confused, and sometimes it's really a good idea often to try and look at the original papers, books, whatever, about things. They are, I would say, about 2/3 of the time, they are clearer than anything that came later. 1/3 of the time, they can be impenetrable because the notation has changed. The way people were thinking about it was kind of crufty. It was, but a lot of this just happened to me. I was trying to understand something about thermodynamics, and I'm like, look, these textbooks are just absolutely opaque, and I don't think that what they're saying is right. So eventually, I go back to a little book called The Theory of Heat, written by a certain James Clerk Maxwell, who was the guy who did Maxwell's equations and so on.
So familiar, yeah.
Right. And so his book is really clear. And it's really clear that there are things, and he pretty much says it, that we don't know how this works. Actually, he has a very lovely thing at the very end. He has a very lovely description of lots of things. And then he's trying to explain, this is maybe late 1860s, 1870 or so. He's trying to explain why there are only a discrete number, it was early 1860s actually, why there are only a discrete set of different kinds of molecules, even though he doesn't know that molecules really exist. Okay? And so turns out Darwin's Origin of Species had been published in 1859. And so Maxwell has this chapter at the end of his book in which he says maybe the reason that there are discrete sets of molecules is for the same reason as there are discrete species in biology, and which is of course complete nonsense.
Right.
But it's interesting to see what
hypotheses they come up with.
Yeah, right, and what's obvious and what's not obvious, and that was at the time not known. Anyway, so we got down a bit of a rabbit hole there of
no, but that's